Episode 13, Shadows Strike Back. The trembling in the earth subsided as Eli and Evelyn emerged from the mansion's ruins, their hearts still pounding from their narrow escape. They had disrupted the Silent Circle's ritual, but there was no time to celebrate. Their victory had been temporary, and they had ignited the Circle's wrath. As they caught their breath outside, they glanced back at the mansion. An eerie silence lingered around it, and shadows seemed to cling to its walls, as if alive. They knew they had only delayed the Circle's plans, and this temporary setback would only fuel the group's fury. The Circle would retaliate. This time, they would be more dangerous than ever. Eli glanced at Evelyn, his face etched with concern. "We need to leave before they send anyone after us. They know we won't stop, and they'll come for us soon." Evelyn nodded. "But where do we go? They've been part of this town longer than anyone can remember. They could have eyes everywhere." They returned to Eli's cabin, keeping to the edges of town and blending into the night as best they could. As they walked, the ominous feeling of being watched crept over them. Though they couldn't see anyone following, they could feel the Silent Circle's presence in every shadowed corner and every silent window. Back at the cabin, they shut the curtains tightly and spoke in hushed tones, as if the walls themselves might be listening. "We need a new plan," Eli said. "We can't keep going like this. They'll find us eventually," and then, he let the thought hang in the air, knowing what would happen if the Circle caught them again. Evelyn opened her satchel and spread the pages she had torn from the tome across the table. "These could be the key," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. This ritual wasn't just about maintaining the curse. They're trying to awaken something else, something they call the Eternal Shadow. Eli studied the pages, his eyes widening as he pieced together the cryptic symbols and incantations. If the Circle completes this, they could call forth whatever remnants of the curse are left, and not just control it, but make it more powerful. Evelyn nodded. "It's like they want to revive the curse, bring it to life again in a way that will make it permanent. If they succeed, there'll be no going back. The darkness will be here to stay." They pored over the texts for hours, deciphering as much as they could. The torn pages revealed pieces of the Circle's plan, the chant to summon the Eternal Shadow, the symbols used to bind it, and hints about a location called the Heart of the Hollow. Eli realized with a chill that this location was likely an ancient, hidden place, buried somewhere within Black Hollow's borders, a place where the founders had attempted to contain the curse centuries ago. "If we can find the Heart of the Hollow before they do," Eli reasoned, "maybe we can put an end to the curse before they have a chance to summon it." Evelyn nodded, her eyes bright with determination. "But we'll need help. We can't fight them alone." They decided to visit the few people they trusted, the townsfolk who had listened to their warnings and seemed willing to stand against the Circle. But as they prepared to leave, a loud thump echoed from outside the cabin. Eli and Evelyn froze, glancing at each other with fear and tension. Another thump. This time closer, like someone, or something, was circling the cabin. Eli signaled for Evelyn to stay back as he crept to the window, pulling aside the curtain just enough to peer outside. The sight made his blood run cold. Shadows flickered in the moonlight, moving in unnatural patterns, weaving between trees, drawing closer. And within the shadows, he could make out figures cloaked in dark robes. The Silent Circle had found them. He turned back to Evelyn, his voice a low whisper. "They're here." She paled but nodded, her hand reaching instinctively for the small knife she kept hidden in her boot. "We need to find a way out." The footsteps grew louder, circling the cabin in a methodical pattern, as though the Circle members were laying a trap around them. There was no way out through the front, and they couldn't risk staying put. Their only option was to flee through the back door and head into the forest, hoping to lose their pursuers in the thick woods. Eli signaled to Evelyn, and together, they slipped out the back, making a break for the cover of the trees. They moved quickly and silently, weaving between branches and staying low, but the shadows seemed to follow them, closing in with relentless precision. They stumbled into the depths of the forest, their breaths ragged and their hearts pounding. The Circle's chanting grew louder, a haunting sound that echoed through the trees, filling the night with a sense of dread. The Circle wasn't just pursuing them, it was summoning something dark and ancient that lurked within the shadows. The footsteps grew louder, circling the cabin in a methodical pattern, as though the circle members were laying a trap around them. There was no way out through the front, and they couldn't risk staying put. Their only option was to flee through the back door and head into the forest, hoping to lose their pursuers in the thick woods. Eli signaled to Evelyn, and together, they slipped out the back, making a break for the cover of the trees. They moved quickly and silently, weaving between branches and staying low, but the shadows seemed to follow them, closing in with relentless precision. They stumbled into the depths of the forest, their breaths ragged and their hearts pounding. The circle's chanting grew louder, a haunting sound that echoed through the trees, filling the night with a sense of dread. The circle wasn't just pursuing them, it was summoning something dark and ancient that lurked within the shadows. Evelyn gripped Eli's arm, her voice barely a whisper. "They're not just after us. They're trying to call it here, to this forest." Eli's mind raced. If the circle succeeded, they would be outmatched, facing a supernatural force as well as their human enemies. But then he remembered the torn pages they had taken from the ritual. Somewhere within those texts might be the answer, a way to disrupt the summoning before it was too late. He pulled the crumpled pages from his pocket, scanning them frantically as they moved. His eyes settled on one passage, a counter-incantation meant to sever the bond between the circle and the entity they sought to summon. But it would take time they might not have. Evelyn glanced at the pages. "If I can keep them distracted, could you perform the counter-ritual?" Eli hesitated. He didn't want to let Evelyn out of his sight, but they didn't have a choice. "Be careful," he said, gripping her hand tightly. She nodded and slipped into the shadows, moving silently back toward where the circle members had gathered. Eli, meanwhile, found a small clearing hidden by trees and began to prepare the ritual. He arranged stones in a circle, marking them with symbols as best as he could remember from the pages. As he started the incantation, a chill filled the air, and he sensed the darkness around him thicken, as if it were aware of his intent. The shadows in the trees seemed to pulse with unnatural life, and Eli felt a pressure building, making it difficult to focus on the words. Meanwhile, Evelyn crept toward the circle, her movements deliberate and quiet. She could see the members gathered in a loose circle, their hands raised as they chanted, their faces obscured beneath their hoods. In the center of their gathering was an eerie darkness, a swirling, tangible shadow that seemed to writhe and grow with each whispered word. Without hesitation, she picked up a large branch and threw it into the midst of the group, causing several members to stumble back in surprise. The chanting faltered for a moment, the darkness wavering as the circle's focus was momentarily disrupted. "Over here," she shouted, drawing their attention away from Eli's position. Several of the robed figures turned toward her, their expressions hidden but their movements menacing. Evelyn took a step back, her heart racing as they advanced, but she held her ground, ready to lead them away from Eli for as long as she could. As they closed in, she bolted, weaving through the trees, drawing them deeper into the forest. The circle members followed, their chanting resuming in low murmurs, but Evelyn's distraction had given Eli the time he needed. Back in the clearing, Eli continued the incantation, feeling a strange energy ripple through the air as he spoke the final words. The ground beneath him trembled, and the shadows in the trees seemed to pull back, as though recoiling from an unseen force. Suddenly, a bone-chilling wail echoed through the forest, and Eli felt the darkness around him shudder. The circle's connection to the entity had been severed. Their ritual was disrupted, the summoning incomplete. The forest returned to silence, the shadows retreating to their natural forms. Evelyn appeared moments later, her face pale but determined. "Did it work?" Eli nodded, still catching his breath. "For now. But they'll be back. And next time, they'll be even more desperate." They made their way back toward town, their minds reeling with the implications of what they had learned. The circle had nearly succeeded in bringing forth the eternal shadow, but their desperation would only grow now that their plans had been disrupted twice. Eli and Evelyn knew they would have to strike first, uncovering the heart of the Hollow before the circle could complete their ritual and unleash a force that would doom Black Hollow forever. End of episode 13.